Alright folks, how you doing? So in the last video I talked about meteor symbolism in James Bond and Game of Thrones, well, briefly. But going back to this book here by David Allen Ritchie called We the Scythians, we find something interesting. We'll start here. After the Romans left Britain, the original culture began to slowly re-emerge, but Ireland still had its history intact, and eventually a return to the homeland was demanded. King Fergus Mór Can Irk returned to Scotland, taking with him the Stone of Destiny, the Lea Fail. I think that's how you pronounce it. I don't know. And re-established the kingdom with its traditional symbol, the stone in the throne, or the Stone of Destiny. The true Celtic bloodline was now back in Scotland, and eventually King Kenneth I MacAlpin united the Picts and the Scots and installed the stone in Scone Abbey near Perth. Successive Scottish kings were crowned in the presence of the stone until it was seized by Edward I of England, when he claimed sovereignty over Scotland in 1296 AD and subjugated the Stuart royal bloodline. I've covered this before on my channel. The battle of the slaughter of Dunbar and the massacre at Berwick. Edward removed what he thought was the Stone of Destiny to England and installed it in the coronation throne at Westminster Abbey, where it stayed for every successive coronation right up to modern times. The stone has now been returned to Edinburgh Castle as a gesture to the Scots from the English government and as acknowledgement of their traditional claims to independence, but the stone must be returned to England for any coronations in the future, a hollow gesture. First of all, I must make it obvious that there is a problem with the Stone of Destiny that now resides in Edinburgh Castle. It is a piece of Perthshire sandstone, nothing like the historical description of polished black basaltic carved stone. Sounds like a meteorite, doesn't it? Albeit a refined one. It appears that Edward was given a phony stone in 1298, I think that should be 1296, and the true stone was hidden away by the Abbot of Scone, who had prior warning of Edward's advancing into Scotland. Now, of course, I covered this yesterday when I talked about the system of beacons or blazers that would warn everybody in the kingdom when the English were on the way. This makes a lot of sense when we examine the details of the events around that time and who were the leading characters involved. We have a huge clue as to the authenticity of the stone when Robert the Bruce refused to take it as part of the settlement at the Treaty of Northampton in 1328. This was the end of the First Scottish War of Independence. If the stone had been genuine, he would have taken it and run laughing all the way home, but he didn't need to. The stone had been in safe hands for many years. And by the way, Robert I, King Robert the Bruce, he was well in tight with the Templars. We'll talk about that in future videos, when we get to Barry Dunford especially. It was guarded by the Knights Templar, the Crusaders, the protectors of the true bloodline. The St. Clairs, or Sinclairs of Roslin, held the clue to the first Vale hiding the city of Seth. Originally from France, they had been members of the Crusades to Jerusalem and Egypt, and later were to become part of the powerful Knights Templar organization throughout Europe. The Templars were forced out of existence in continental Europe in 1307 when the Catholic Pope Clement instigated the Inquisition that de-enfranchised them. The remnants of the organisation fled, many of them to Scotland, thanks to Robert the Bruce, which offered a safe haven from Rome and swore allegiance to the Stuart bloodline. I believe that the Sinclairs were the guardians of many secrets, and that it was not a coincidence that led them to settle in the environs of Edinburgh and the Lothians. The Sinclairs were also the Earls of Orkney, the islands off the northeast tip of Scotland, another place that will play a vital role in our final picture. Oh, absolutely. When you start reading like The Riddle of Prehistoric Britain by Beaumont, and he talks about how basically the Orkneys and the Shetlands were the seat of the first men, We'll get to that. The Knights, I mean, when you watch like Game of Thrones and you see Jon Snow talking about he's descended from the first men and all the rest of it, that's really a sort of wink in this sort of direction.
My father was Ned Stark. I have the blood of the first men. My ancestors lived here, same as yours.
You know, like I said in the previous video, these authors, like your George R.R. Martins, they know a lot more than you think, and they're putting things subtly in there in the form of fiction. The Knights Templar had been a long time in the Orient and acquired great knowledge from local culture, architecture, metallurgy, mathematics and geometry, and especially history, and one that was very different from the Christian history of their homelands. And then it goes from there, not really pertinent to this, but if we skip forward in the book a bit, going back to the Stone of Destiny, the Benben was the most sacred artifact in Egypt. Along with the Israelites, it disappeared without comment from Egyptian history. It was, quote, the measure that had been described as being made of meteoric ironstone. So once again, when you're watching movies like Spectre, when the elite are worshipping meteors, yeah, maybe we can start to fill in the gaps a little bit. When Zedekiah's daughter left Judah with the Stone of the Covenant and took it to Ireland, it eventually ended up in Scotland and was called the Stone of Destiny. This is why the Judeo-Normans, like your Robert the Bruces and your Stuarts, were crowned upon that stone. It all goes all the way back to biblical times.
I wear this crown as a symbol of my duty to serve the Scottish people. My title is King of Scots, not of the land, but of the people.
The Sinclairs of Roslin were the guardians of the stone in the Stuart bloodline, and when Edward I invaded Scotland, the Abbot Henry of Scone alleged to have hidden it away from the true Stone of Destiny, saying that one day it would be found by equations at a future time when Scotland regains its independence once more. Very interesting. You know, so they've hidden it away and they're only going to bring it back when Scotland is completely freed of British or English yoke. Now that's very eye-opening in the fact that it's described as a polished black basalt stone. In other words, volcanic, and that ties into the whole meteor thing when you go back to the riddle of the earth. Anyway, I hope this has filled in a few gaps, given further information, but we've a long ways to go yet before we can truly understand all this. Anyway, thanks for watching.